Tabletop wargaming is a hobby where people build, paint, and play with miniature models and use various rule sets and dice to replicate different types of combat in various types of settings, ranging from historical, science fiction, or fantasy. Often to accompany the miniatures, players will build or purchase terrain in order to make their battles feel more real. Tabletop wargaming has been around since the late 1700s and continues to be a very popular pastime. In this program, we will learn about what kinds of games players enjoy, such as Warhammer 40,000 and Battletech, the miniatures they use, the way the game rules work, the story behind the games, players who design their own games, and a focus on the people and community of tabletop wargaming.
So I've been playing Warhammer for about 3 years at this point. It's been an interest of mine though since high school. I would hear stories about like the books, the characters, and the history and lore online. And during the pandemic, it really became a big thing for me. I would just go online. I would listen to like audiobooks, YouTubers talk about the stories, and eventually I figured out there's a starter set for the game. I can split the price with my friend. We split the army, and the rest is history from there.
Warhammer 40,000, first released in 1987 as Warhammer 40,000 Rogue Trader, is one of the most popular tabletop wargames played today. Set in a dystopian science fantasy world tens of thousands of years in the future, players can choose from a variety of different factions to build, paint, and play with.
Warhammer is a tabletop wargame. You have these different models here, and each of them have different rules, like this thing does this thing does that. And you assemble an army out of these various models, and you battle your friends or acquaintances. And it's not just the fighting different lists against each other, it's also hobbying. You buy these kits and you build them, you assemble them the way you want, you paint them the way you want. It's a mix of that artistic side of things, but also that strategic side that scratches that itch that for some people like chess would, for example. This hobby is made of 3 different parts, like the actual tabletop wargaming, the lore and like stories behind the characters, and the assembling and modeling. For me, it's really hard to pick one because they all have there's a lot of excitement for me. Honestly, if I had to pick one, I'd probably say the lore and the stories, because when I'm painting the models, I am listening to audiobooks. When I am playing the game, I'm getting excited about seeing which characters my friends actually brought to the table.
Okay.
So these 2 big ones here are called Imperial Knights. They are massive ancient war machines from humanity's golden age, piloted by nobles like from the Middle Ages. They have like these different houses behind them. I love the assembly of them. They're huge projects to like make, to build, to paint. I had a lot of fun, especially trying new things on these, because when I got these knights, it was when I was getting confident in my painting. I started to know what I was doing. So like you can see the like grime and dirt on them. I tried like doing I would take a sponge and I would like dab little bits of different colors to get it look like this thing has been on the field for days or weeks getting damage. In terms of tabletop, if you think of an army like a chess game, Knights is like your opponent has a chessboard, you have a chess team too, but you got all queens, but you have much less stuff on the table. I like the risk of having more powerful things on the table, but there's less of them, so when I lose them, they hurt a lot. So these green figures here are called Space Marines. They're kind of the poster boys of Warhammer. They are super soldiers, think like Captain America, but futuristic. They wear power armor. Each one has spent generations training for conflict to defend humanity from the darkness of the galaxy. The thing I love about them is you can kind of do whatever you want with Space Marines. It's like the multi-tool of the game. You can make it so your army's all melee focused, so it's all like artillery and tanks. You can kind of do whatever you want with them. And that comes too with like making your paint scheme. You got different factions in the lore that are well established, and there are lots of people who will make armies of one faction or the other that have books about them. I chose something different. I made my own faction. I have my own little backstories for certain characters. I have custom decals, which are like these skull and wing symbols you see on their shoulders. That is my own thing. I got a design off online for it. I had someone help print it, and I put it on the model so I could show off my own history and chapter and have my own stories for my own models. This big tank here is called a Land Raider. It is personally my favorite vehicle. It's just a big trapezoid with armor and guns. Whenever I put on the tabletop, it is always the star of the show, carrying my troops into battle and just taking a beating. I often put these guys inside it, which are called Terminators. They're like the elite of the elite in the army. This big leader here, I took a kit for a Terminator character, but I got custom bits. I took a mace from another kit. I got a shield 3D printed for him to make a custom look for him to make the army truly my own. So these characters, this army here are the Stormcast Eternals. They are heavenly soldiers made by the god Sigmar to defend mankind in its darkest hour. Think of them like an army of Thors. They're all empowered by lightning, land on the battlefield like the Bifrost. These dragons are a cavalry unit that they have a lot of health, they deal a lot of damage, they're really fast, they're a huge pain in the butt, but they're expensive. I could probably bring like 3 other groups of infantry semi-dragons, so they're like the queen in your chessboard to think. These infantry here are vanquishers. They got big swords. They just kind of fill that gap of they will hold objectives, they will hold the line while the rest of my army does work. One thing that I was really kind of blown away by is how welcoming the local wargaming community has been, especially here in southeastern Wisconsin. They're like, when I first came into the hobby, I went to my local game store. I told the owner of the store, hey, I want to get into Warhammer. She took me into the back, pointed me at like 4 people who were playing Warhammer, and I spent like 5 hours there talking to them about the hobby, learning what they loved about it. They helped me figure out my army to start with, figure out the paints to start with, gave me tips on this is what I should do, this is what I should watch out for, and they really helped me get into it. Not only like getting into it in terms of stepping into like the hobby, but also learning it. They would teach me the rules. If I made a mistake, like I put my infantry in the middle of nowhere and they got shot off the board, they would tell me, this is what you did wrong, this is what you could do better. And the community is super welcoming in terms of teaching new players, but also encouraging them in the hobby, like telling them, oh, you did a great job painting that model, have you tried this? Or excited like, oh, I've never seen someone do that before, tell me how you did it. And it's really good at encouraging not only the tabletop play, but also that creative aspect of it.
Another popular wargame is Battletech, which has been around since 1984. Battletech is a wargame about giant robots battling it out on a hex grid. Unlike many other science fiction settings, Battletech does not feature any aliens, and its in-universe technology is more realistic and plausible. The rules are geared towards a realistic combat system where the giant robots, called battle mechs, can take damage in different locations and have a chance to have certain internal and external systems disabled if they receive a critical hit.
In Battletech, each player is in charge of 1 or more mechs. These are the sci-fi evolution of tanks. These are giant walking robots, typically bristling with weapons and ammunition to fight other giant walking robots. This is shown in a turn where each player has to move one of their mechs, and then once all mechs have been moved, then you must shoot at each other, and if anything is close enough, you would then move into a physical phase where you can punch, kick, or attack with various weapons that a mech may be carrying on them. To simulate the ebb and flow of battle, each mech has a pilot inside. That pilot has a skill for how well they can shoot and maneuver their vehicle. This is shown as a flat number, which you have to roll 2 6-sided dice and get equal to or greater than that number to hit. As mechs are moving around the board, they will accrue different modifiers to this number. For example, if a mech is running, it would be harder to hit than a stationary mech. In the same way, if you are running in your vehicle, it would be harder to hit someone than if you remain stationary. I like Battletech for the strategy involved in it, both on and off the main game board. I like the development of different unit compositions. In this game, they're typically called lances, which is a set of 4 mechs. I also like how in the game itself, it is not as punishing as other games. One singular mistake will not lose you an entire game. It is typically keeping yourself in bad scenarios multiple turns in a row that would cause you to lose. So it's a little bit forgiving in the long run of the game.
Adepticon, a 5-day wargaming convention held every year since 2003, is a place for wargamers to socialize, play in tournaments, and participate in different events.
We are here at Adepticon, which is a big, massive mini wargaming convention. There's all sorts of games being played here today. We're playing this, they're over there playing with like over 1,000 people playing this massive Warhammer 40,000 tournament. All kinds of tournaments happening here, but it's not just about tournaments, it's also about the convention side, the hobby side. We got cosplayers here, we got all sorts of people here doing wargaming, which is a huge hobby that we all love. So the game that we're playing today is called Adeptus Titanicus. So what we are doing is we're taking the full-scale models from the game Warhammer 40,000 and using them, because the typical scale for this game is about this big. We're using the big boys today. So we are doing a big mega battle with all these big stompy robots. So the way this game works is we have these control panels right here. On these we have to keep track of our engines getting too hot, our void shields that protect us, and then when those burst, we have to track the damage on the individual pieces. To simplify it, during the game you have a movement phase, a shooting phase, and then a close combat phase where you punch each other if you have like a big fist, or kick each other if you have just feet or whatever. During your turn, you'll move a guy, then the enemy will move a guy. So it's very reactive in the way it moves. So they move, we move, they shoot, then we shoot. Typically, when you play a game like this, you use dice about this big. We're using big, massive foam dice to dictate everything that we're doing. And they're flying all over the place, and these are very expensive models, about $2,000 to $3,000 for a lot of them. So we need to make sure that they don't get hurt. So we have very special rules, like none of us are wearing our shoes, which is weird, and it's great. And we have these foam dice so all of our guys can be protected. We're only supposed to have one person on the mat at a time, and then we're not supposed to walk backwards and a bunch of other stuff like that. My favorite part is I get to see my friends that I don't get to see very often. I live on the East Coast, my buddy lives on the West Coast. We come to all these big conventions that happen all over the United States, and this is how we meet up with each other. It's not about the gaming, it's about doing something that you love with your friends.
Aside from conventions, players also meet up at local stores.
Well, we're at Gamers Realm at 14666 West National Avenue. I'm a tabletop game store that does role-playing games, miniature games, and board games. I've been here since January 22nd of 2025, and I was previously at a different location for 5 years down the road. So the reason I moved down the road to a much bigger location was to cater a little bit to the community, to be able to have the game space, the play space, be able to host and run events so that the community could it could thrive and again build that up. That was the biggest part, because the retail space isn't that much bigger, it's a little bit bigger, but the winners were really the play space. I increased the play space probably almost tenfold, which allows me to do more events, more groups, more diversity in the types of games that I run. In high school, I wanted at that time, before the internet, I'm a little old, was the mail order, and I wanted to do a mail order hobby store initially. Well, that didn't pan out, so over the years I did lots of other things and eventually worked for another store and managed that one, and then moved on from there, and always kind of wanted to open one from there, and the opportunity came along, so I did. What makes this store unique is the fact that I'm so focused on miniature gaming. Most other stores are Magic and Warhammer, but I have over 30 different miniature games that aren't Warhammer, and I, again, do quite a bit of role playing, but it's mostly the hobby selection and the miniature selection. That's what sets me apart. Since I like that end of the hobby so much, that's what I focused on. I grew up building car and plane models, so this was kind of when I got into Dungeons and Dragons, building and painting the figures was a big thing for me. We did a lot of the tabletop actual figures. And then it kind of progressed from there. I got into Warhammer and Battletech when it first came out. I love the hobby aspect of it. I love the painting. I love what it looks like when it's all put together and on the table and you have two painted forces against each other. To make things a little easier for the community, we live in Wisconsin, so winter's cold, summer's humid. It's really tough to do rattle cans, spray priming, even airbrushing sometimes. So I'm planning on putting booths up to be able to do that in a controlled environment, heated, air conditioned, where you can do it year-round. They'll be vented, so you don't have to worry about that. We're putting in some 3D printers, so we're going to be able to do 3D printing to hire, and do some terrain as well as some other aspects for the store with the 3D printing. And I have lockers available so people can come if they don't want to transport their books, figures, whatever, week to week. They can just store them in a locker, have and use that facility. That's a lock. The lockers will be locked and the room will be locked, so it's safe and secure. The wargaming community is really quite nice. It's a great group of people, male and female. There's no distinction. They play all sorts of tabletop games, role-playing games. I have living card games. Have great groups for role-playing. The miniature community is really involved, loves to do events, and they're really welcoming to new people.
Some people, like Joshua Clay, design and playtest their own board games that they've thought up and created.
The board game I made is called Wizard Wars. The entire concept was making something similar to chess, but a little bit easier to get into, a little more random chance than strictly strategy. So I built a game where the board, rather than being square grid pieces, is a hexagonal grid. And each time you play a game, you build the board using terrain pieces. So there's a little added difference to each game rather than a stagnant game start like you would have in chess. So how I came up with the game is kind of a weird story. When I was in middle school, I was writing a creative story for a class, and in it, the characters were playing a board game, so I had to create a board game for these characters to play. I came up with the concept of this all the way back then, and it was only recently that I decided to turn that concept into reality. The whole concept of each player having a single piece moving around a three-dimensional terrain rather than a flat board, all of that was kind of created years ago, but then now turned into reality. When the game starts, each player only has a single piece. The piece kind of acts as both your king and your queen, the goal being to remove the opponent's first piece or their wizard from the board. To stop a player from doing this, each player can attempt to summon other pieces onto the board. These are called summons. There are major and minor summons. Each one, when you attempt to summon it onto the board, you must roll a dice, and there's a chance that you can fail at a summon roll. The major summons have a higher chance of failure, but are a more effective piece in general on the board rather than the minor summons. I kind of developed each one in a way that they would counteract another piece. So minor summons move fairly quickly but are incredibly weak. They're good at blocking areas, keeping you from moving into those areas. And the major summons are kind of your heavy hitters. They move a little bit slower, can take more damage to themselves, but also deal more damage. I designed the game to be relatively easy to pick up for someone who hasn't played board games before. The rules are relatively not complex as opposed to other large war games. I personally feel that the difficulty is about on par with chess in terms of learning how to play the game. There are a few nuances that you'd have to learn a little extra from chess, but I think it's about the same. And my goal is to make sure each game lasts no longer than 15 minutes. I don't want games to drag on for hours and hours at a time with no one accomplishing anything and neither player having fun. The goal is to make the game something that can be picked up here and there and then easily put it down, rather than other war games that take hours and hours just to start a battle. To increase the replayability of this game, I added a terrain-based system. Each player is given 15 terrain tiles at the start of the game. They then take turns placing these terrain tiles one at a time onto the board. Now, typically during testing, we've just selected a player to just place the first piece. If you wanted to, you could roll a die and see whoever gets the highest would be the first person to place. That hasn't come up right now during testing. There hasn't been any negatives or positives to placing the first piece versus the last piece. The key rule for placing pieces onto the board is because there's a hexagon-shaped board and you must place your wizard on opposite corners of the board at the start of the game. You can't just block a path directly. I found this out very quickly during testing that it's easy to block a player's piece in and then that person just cannot play the game. They're unable to move their piece, unable to do anything until they just lose. This triggered me to create the rule where you must have a singular path from any one corner of the board to any other corner of the board when you place your terrain pieces. So the spark for me to build this game from the story I had created so long ago was I had been going through my computer, going through old files, kind of doing a little bit of housekeeping, and I found that story. And reading through it again, I realized now with my background as a tool and die maker, my technical skills, and having purchased a 3D printer, I can just make this game. There's nothing stopping me from turning this idea I had from so long ago into a physical thing. And that sparked building the entire board game. The development process for this was a lot easier than I thought it was going to be. I'd actually gone into a lot of detail on how the game worked in my story. So a lot of what I was creating was just reading through the story, figuring out how I can transition it from just writing to physical. I had some difficulties making sure that certain concepts transitioned well into a physical medium. In the story that I had written, it was a computer game, and so there were randomized roles within the computer, so I had to transition all of that from a digital medium to a physical medium with dice. Right now, the game uses very simple shapes for representing each of the pieces. I have a simple cylinder, a cube to represent the minions. If this becomes a game that I'm selling, I would very much like to transition these into scale models of things. So the wizard would look like a real wizard. Minions would have bow and arrows or swords and shields. I am excited to see where this project takes me. know life can change quite a bit, and who knows, maybe I have a future in game development.
With developments in 3D printing and the internet, more and more people can invent their own rule sets and create new games to share and play with others. Tabletop Wargaming continues to thrive and provide players with an engaging and social way to spend their free time.